Hi everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for our second In Conversation with webinar. Having these webinars gives us an opportunity to be truly New South Wales and to open up to the regions. So thanks to everyone from the regions that are attending today. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay our respects to the elders, both past and present. And also before we start, one more thing, I'm just going to plug a few of our great events that are coming up, the New South Wales chapter. So our next event is actually a face-to-face event. It's on the 22nd of June and it's to be held at Corpus Christi in Oak Flats. This is a chance to use an agile learning space. So we're not just looking at it, we're actually using it as learners. And we're doing an activity that will help to make the world a better place, actually, helping to end energy poverty. It will be a student-led workshop, and so student voice will be at the forefront of that event. So we're really excited about that, 22nd of June. We've also got another webinar, which is in conversation with an architect on the 1st of July. So that's with BVN, and they will be talking about the International Grammar School Bibliothèque that they have designed and won multiple awards for. And then the third event that I'd like to just let you know about is a contemporary workplace event. So that'll be held in July, towards the end of July. We've got Michael McQueen as a keynote, so that's really exciting. Venue is to be confirmed, but it will be in a contemporary workplace. So without further ado, I will hand over to Darren Cox, who will be facilitating this webinar this afternoon. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks, Jo, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an incredible privilege this afternoon to have Greg join us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Darren Cox. I work for Sydney Catholic Schools and I'm the head of school design. I'd been a school principal for 8 years previous to this, and so had the incredible pleasure to meet Greg a number of times as we talked about future-focused education and look at what future schooling may be like. And now I have the privilege of actually working across 150 schools with Sydney Catholic Schools, helping them design their contemporary learning spaces as we look at education into the future. So Greg, an inspirational leader, he is the principal of St Luke's at Marsden Park, a visionary educational leader with a strong desire to transform learning. He currently serves as the principal leader at St Luke's Marsden Park, one of 80 schools within the Catholic Education Diocese of Parramatta network. Commencing in 2017, St Luke continues to design and establish a new normal for preschool to post-school learning by combining 5 educational services of preschool, primary, secondary, out-of-hours school care, and a high-needs studio as part of an extended school day, which runs from 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday. Greg has an ability to get people on board, and his passion for student-centred learning wins commitment from staff, students, and the wider community. As a creative, strategic, and analytical thinker, and with the invaluable support of a collaborative leadership team, dedicated staff and supportive parents, Greg acts with a fierce urgency of the now by leading a preschool to post-school community which nurtures curious children to become creative contributors and innovative problem solvers for a changing world. Greg, it is great to have you with us this afternoon. We're looking forward to hearing you share some of your thoughts and insights and theories and philosophies on education as we move into the future. And Greg and I started on a Zoom with each other this morning with 7:30 from educators in America. And here we are at the end of the day, still talking about education, which absolutely fuels our passion. So Greg, over to you. We look forward to hearing about the incredible work you're doing out there at St Luke's at Marsden Park.
Thanks very much, Darren, and good afternoon or evening, wherever you're coming in from. I just wanted to express my thanks to the LEA team to be invited to share with you the St Luke's story, which we'll delve into a little bit later on. I also, before continuing, wanted to acknowledge that wherever we are beaming in from today, we're on the land of Aboriginal people, and we acknowledge that as the oldest living culture in the world, that we share that land and we should be gracious for that land. And as I say at St Luke's, that we honour the story of the Aboriginal elders before us, both past and now present, with igniting a narrative whichever our school community has the capability of producing and living every day. So thanks very much, Darren, for the introduction. And look, it's been really interesting working with the LEA team, to Joe, to Darren, to Cecily, and Mark. I've been really appreciative and found it quite some provocations in the thinking. What we've sort of got planned for you over the next half an hour or so, obviously the chat function is there to use, and I'll try and check in with that every now and then, but Darren and Joe and others will be monitoring that in the back end. The plan is to deliver the presentation and then have a Q&A at the end of it. I've got something planned for just over about half an hour to share our story. We're trying to weave a story that looks at the learning, that looks at the physical building, which looks at the virtual platforms that are required for modern day contemporary learning, and probably jumping on the back of a few learnings that were forced upon us in the last couple of years with the whole situation with regards to COVID. So again, my welcome to you all. Apparently we've got people from a lot of regional settings. For someone who's worked in regional settings for about 12 years, my special hello to you, because it's great to see some people beaming in from the regions to keep us city folk honest, who are based in city centres around the place. So and obviously part of this, we've got various stakeholders invested in schools and learning, whether they be educators like myself or architects, builders, and anyone with a vested interest will, share some Luke's story of past, present, and future. And feel free to, as I said, ask some questions as we go along. I think we might just get onto the slides now, maybe if we can. And the reason why this first slide comes up, obviously it's a Learning Environments Australia presentation for the 10th of May, but I deliberately left it in there because St Luke's is one of 80 schools in the Catholic Education Diocese of Parramatta, so we're a part of the Catholic system of the Parramatta Diocese. Our Executive Director, Greg Whitby, and his senior leadership team work closely with leaders across schools to develop not only innovative learning settings, but the learning to complement those settings. What we've all realised in the last little while is that there's been some questioning for a little while of how can we not snap back after COVID? And, working with the Director of Learning, Maura Manning, and Gavin Hayes, who's now one of our principals, late last year, unpacking that question with a few of our senior leaders on staff, we ended up hosting an event for some of our principals and senior leaders across primary and secondary schools during the holidays. And that was the question that we were attempting to respond to. What new ways of student learning will enrich the professional lives of staff? I suppose my question today would be, is what new ways of student learning will impact on the physical and virtual learning environments that will become our reality sooner rather than later? The next slide, I think, acknowledges, as I said, the traditional owners of lands on which we gather today, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. For, as we say, they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples across this region of Sydney and beyond, and wherever you are coming in from, we acknowledge that as well. If we just go to the next slide. Thanks, Alan. This is our backstory. So St Luke's is only into its 6th year. We're not even 6 years of age yet. We commenced in February of 2017 with 86 students, 12 staff, kindergarten to year 6. Right now we're 1,422 students plus 77 3 to 5-year-olds every day as a part of our early learning centre. We have 145 staff. We're K to 11. We have a high needs studio. And as I said, we've got before and after school care. And I'll talk a little bit more about our structures. We're preschool to post school. We teach 2 to 60, and we are about to embark on a very exciting and engaging outdoor learning environment that will complete the school along with the physical buildings, which are due for completion early next year, so that we can cater for the 1,900 plus students that we'll have catering across K to 12 in our environment. So that's just a little bit of our backstory. The 2 to 60 is interesting. People find that very, very interesting. Alienza, our architects, and there may be some of those people with us today. Charles Glanville and his team have worked closely with Paul Meldrum, a leader of innovation in our system, CDP, to bring alive the vision of Greg Whitby and others to ensure that learning spaces are engaging, are inviting, and we start with choice from various forms of furniture, being soft cushion, hard surfaces, choices in heights and things like that, to also have many multiple points of focus to allow for the fluidity of a 1 to 30 environment, a 2 to 60 environment, and also lots of small group learning so that the teacher's not always leading the learning, because that's part of an old paradigm. And the outdoor learning probably follows on from Stephen Heppel, who is very, very keen to make sure to activate every space of any school environment, and certainly to make it fun and engaging and a place where learning can take place, even if people are passively enjoying some rest and relaxation in break time. So that's all coming to fruition. We're very fortunate for the facilities that we have in the physical environment, acoustics, lighting, it's all really well thought through. So the team from Alianza have worked closely with Paul and others and the staff at school to ensure that's been our reality. If we can just go to the next slide, please. Alan, thank you. One of the things that we started off at St Luke's, I came to the job, well, around now, 6 years ago, about, 8-9 months before the school opened. And I responded to what Greg Whitby and others in the system had talked about, that the intent was for St Luke's, along with Santa Sophia and St Mark's, who have been around for a little while, but Santa Sophia started the year after us. But as a large and complex school setting, all three school communities have been known as college communities, designing and establishing a new normal for preschool to post-school learning. How we did that at St Luke's was to question everything, and to question everything as we pursued our vision, which was co-constructed with parents and students at the time. Yes, year 5 and 6 students had input into this vision, which continues to serve us today. So we're constantly nurturing faith-filled, curious children to become creative contributors and innovative problem solvers for a changing world. And everything has to align with that. I'll probably go into the next slide to talk a little bit more about that. Maybe the slide after, but now here's the organisational construct of our preschool to post-school community. Now, there's a lot in this, so I'll take a little while to unpack this, and my understanding is that those who are members will have access to the presentation, I think, as early as tomorrow. I have no issue with sharing this, so that'll be forwarded. But this is essentially, I'll walk you through this. On the left-hand side, you'll see various ribbons that start with the Early Learning Centre for 3 to 5-year-olds. We then have the School of Foundations, which we don't have primary and secondary. So in questioning everything, we came up with a way forward across all 3 schools, actually, where there would be 3 schools within the one Catholic learning community. So St Luke's is a learning community, it's not a school. There's a School of Foundations for 600 kids in kindergarten to year 4, whose focus is around establishing the fundamentals and the strong foundations, not the basic of literacy and numeracy, not the basic of reading and writing and adding up, because those of us that are primary people in this forum today know that there's nothing basic about teaching a child to read or write. In fact, I keep taking my hat off every day to the marvellous work that especially infants teachers do in working with young 5 to 7 and 8-year-olds around that space. But once establishing those foundations, we have the School of Leadership from years 5 to 8, where by the end of year 8, the aspiration is that every child can speak confidently and competently in an area of interest, and that doesn't have to be a subject. And I'll unpack that a little bit more about what that looks like when we come across life design and a few other things. And then we flow into years 9 to 12, which are known as the School of Entrepreneurs. And the School of Entrepreneurs are using the passion and the interest that students are becoming more aware of through that School of Leadership phase to apply those in contexts where they can make a real world difference. Each of those schools, early learning, foundations, leadership, and entrepreneurs have their own leadership team. The heads of those schools and the assistant principals in those schools then sit on the campus college community leadership team. Those 3 schools of 4 are wrapped with a 5th school called Arunga. St Luke's Arunga is a local Aboriginal term meaning harmony. It's our special, what's known as a special education unit in the wider world. We call it a high needs studio because it's a studio for learning, because students with additional needs can learn. And we have a very dedicated team of about half a dozen staff who are working with about 38 students at the moment. That'll eventually become 60 students across kindergarten to year 12. So that's the organisational structure. You'll see a ribbon that runs through the big S, or some students refer to it as the snake, of literacy, numeracy, and the social skills, enterprise skills required for a changing world. So they're prominent throughout the life of 15 years of learning as part of a 60-year curriculum. They'll always need to be with us because we're in a Catholic setting. Like any faith community, we have faith formation opportunities for all our students, and also weave through that is experiential inquiry. So COVID has put a halt to the experiences of the outdoors, but that's just now opening up again. And what you'll see on the right-hand side, you'll see the external partnerships, and there's a way in for a lot of those external partnerships. Ourselves and Santa's a Fair Share of Partnerships Manager. Her work is wonderfully well done in liaising with teachers to find out which experts can help with the learning at any given time from younger years right through to year 11 and 12. And the intent is to keep firming up those partnerships with directly linking students to real world work whilst at school or beyond school. At the bottom of the construct, you'll see 6 words. There are 6 pillars of learning. So another way of looking at that is graduate outcomes. Those 6 pillars of learning: witness, manage and relate. They're the social skills required for a changing world, and to inquire, think and create are the enterprise skills. And that language is quite embedded with our work at St Luke's. So there's an intent to continually teach and assess those capabilities. We're doing it at best, to be quite honest, at a surface level and entry level at the moment. But in partnering with the University of Melbourne and the New Metrics project, and under the leadership of our recently appointed leader of New Metrics, Joe Kirby, we are deepening our understanding of how to teach and assess those, to do that work, to teach those pillars, to assess those capabilities as we engage in the compliance requirements of curriculum. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, and I'm sure that'll come up as a question at another time. Darren, when you right, please, next slide, please. Brilliant. So these are those pillars. So you're going to see a couple of slides where questioning everything led to something. So questioning everything led to New Metrics, which is talking about the teaching and assessing of those pillars. We're of the belief that if a child can witness in the way of Christ, can manage themselves, relate with others, inquire and pose questions, to think critically and to create solutions to real world problems, that they will be well prepared for a lifestyle of fulfillment and contentment when they leave school. There's a few other pieces to add to that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But there are 6 pillars. Underpinning those pillars, there are 3 or 4 outcomes which are consistent from early learning right through to stage 6. There's a continuum and progressions mapped to these 6 pillars. Almost all of them are a direct lift from the general capabilities. So we didn't see the need to reinvent the wheel of the general capabilities. It's all there. What we saw a need for was to reframe the 7 general capabilities, 2 of them being literacy and numeracy. We took those out because all schools focus on those. We looked at the 5 remaining ones, things like personal and social responsibility, ethical understanding, intercultural understanding, I think creative and critical thinking, and digital literacy. They've been meshed in with our 6 pillars, and we've I suppose, narrowed the focus so that it's manageable with everything else a teacher has to do as a part of their work. I can talk more offline about that at another time. We have professional learning tours at St Luke's every 3 weeks. You're more than welcome to come and join us to have a look at the place and see a lot of this in action with students. That we've built on the good work done through the Australian curriculum around the general capabilities. It's all there. We've just reframed it in a way that we teach and assess. Where we're now moving towards is working with the University of Melbourne, Professor Sandra Milligan, and the great work that she does. We've also got a connection with Jan Owen, the co-author of the recent report about success in learning for all, where those people are working with us because they're outstanding in their work. Sandra Milligan is brilliant, and the team at University of Melbourne and the project itself is outstanding, and we keep deepening our understanding of how to teach those and assess them, because assessment is key, and the moderating of assessment is key as well. Thanks, Darren. Next slide, please. So in questioning everything, we went new courses, not old school certificates. So I'll just explain that a little bit more. We've been questioning everything. We took a minimum indicative hours approach to St Luke's, especially from Year 7 onwards, but also for a lot of our key learning areas in K to 6. In taking that minimum indicative hours approach, in also, just to elaborate that, what it's, and for those of you beyond New South Wales, we're governed by the New South Wales Education Standards Authority. That's the group that honours the government legislation, and as a part of that very thick booklet that we can read when we need to try and bend a rule or two, what I've know that is that the indicative hours are set for 80 to 90% of students who in that time are able to achieve the outcomes to a satisfactory standard. So there's no regulation, there's no obligation for students to get A, B, C's and D's. We don't even use that language at St Luke's, but to on a 5-point scale achieve above the equivalent of a D. And in fact, if they were to get an E, I'm still yet to find a school that holds kids back every year based on them not achieving outcomes in a course. So we've challenged that thinking insofar as, well, we said, if 80 to 90% of students can achieve those outcomes to a satisfactory standard, and most of them would be able to do that beyond, why are we giving them more hours? And as I shamelessly say, I need to find yet that 25-year-old who will cite, for example, English, we're obligated to indicatively timetable 400 hours across 4 years. Most schools sit at 500 plus. I'm still yet to find that 25-year-old who cites that 401st to the 500th hour of English. And I'm an English teacher in a life gone by. That's either the reason for their success or failure in life at the age of 25 or 30 or 35. So that's the sort of questioning that we took to it. Out of that also came the questioning of why are we providing the same old school certificate electives in Year 9 and 10 when we don't have to do that anymore. So we've dropped that and come up with a course called Life Design. Again, that graphic on the left-hand side goes into some detail, but on the right-hand side, essentially we have life coaches come in, at least 2 life coaches come in a full day to work with staff and students, and it's around this course called Life Design. One of them comes in on a Thursday for half a day, just as a drop-in. And those life coaches, that's a group called Inner Zone, who have also developed modules that can be delivered remotely or delivered not as in detail as this, but the key components of this can be worked on with those guys. And again, if that's something that you are interested in, feel free to contact me via various means. But as a part of this course, we look at their strengths, their interests, their motivations. We also have students understand their purpose. And their purpose is based around 3 questions. Who am I? What can I do? And what problems do I want to solve? If they're continually looking, and they're questions you won't see in HSC. They're not questions you'll see in NAP plan this week or next week. but they're vital for students to know who they are and what they can do so they can understand and be on the first step towards what their purpose is. We do that by engaging, having our life coaches lead teachers to assist students to unpack survey tools to a great depth, understand their talents, understand their strengths. I've done it. My strengths is, number one, I'm a learner. Thankfully, that's my number one strength, being in the education setting. But I'm a learner. I'm strategic. What else do I do? I'm self-assured. I take responsibility, and I'm an achiever. So those sorts of strengths are unpacked with students. How can you apply them in a place where you're interested or passionate about, and that helps with their motivation. We have a course called Next Level Self in Year 10, which is all about subject selection, but not just about subject selection, where students pull on their sim, their purpose. In their purpose, at the end of Year 8, every Year 8 student actually makes a 15-minute presentation to guests and panelists and community partners who come in to hear from these students. Every year they walk away, those panelists, blown away, literally. Our local member, Prukar, who's also the Shadow Minister for New South Wales Education, continually references St Luke's of what we do there, and those students being quite a long way down the track to understanding who they are, what can do, as compared to a lot of 35 and 40-year-olds. We have dual credentialing, where we map some of the HSC course content to be registered as a part of, and not additional to, but a part of the HSC work towards a diploma. We're only just starting that, but there's a lot more life to that in the years to come. We're looking to develop a learner profile in the work that's done with the University of Melbourne, and a lot of the work that they've done serves for online folios of work. Those last two are probably next steps or beginning next steps. And so we do give due credit to students to understand the most important subject there is in school, and that is them. So, yeah. Thanks, Darren. If we can go. When you question everything, you question the learning. So, one of our findings through COVID, and it's not just limited to St Luke's, but a lot of students across a lot of school settings in Australia really enjoyed the autonomy and the choice that came with setting their own direction, because they may not have been having as much face-to-face as what they would have had in the school, or they might not have been timetabled to have the same amount of online learning. At St Luke's certainly didn't do that. We were lucky to engage virtually through Zoom for about a third of a day, and using Canvas online platform to blend the learning and progress the learning with students. For a lot of the students, they love that. So we've done a couple of things with that. In relation, we've developed this learning cycle. So we have 90-minute blocks, not 30-minute blocks, not 60-minute blocks. The 90-minute blocks have implications for furniture, so it needs to be comfortable. You can put up with a crook chair for maybe 45 minutes, but it's very, very hard to put up with it for much longer than that. But what we've done is we don't have the schoolwork, homework exchange, like back and forth. We've come up with a cycle. So a student has 90 minutes of managed learning, once or twice or three times a cycle, a fortnight, where then they go after that lesson. The understanding between teacher and student is that the teacher will set work that will consolidate work from the lesson for about 15 or 20 minutes, as this is the case for the stage 6 class, and then for another 20 minutes that they would then prep or prepare for the next lesson. So this is our sort of cycle interpretation of flipped learning, but we've added the consolidation context to it, and the students get to engage in those activities that are listed on all the boxes, which I won't go. So there's teacher managed learning, there's the consolidation, and then there's the flipped learning in preparation for the next lesson. If we can just go to the next slide as well. And so also out of COVID, with that learning cycle, we've decided to reduce face-to-face even more. I just need to make the point, indicative hours and face-to-face hours are not linked. We sometimes get falling into this trap, and in New South Wales, we're negotiating face-to-face hours. They probably won't change. They need to, because if we ask teachers to collaborate more, they need to teach less. But as a part of our learning cycle, and a part of some data that we looked at through COVID and prior to, or in between the two COVID shutdowns, our students were registering they were tired, and we combined that data with brain science and their like of the autonomy of self-directing learning. So every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, students have 3 choices for the first session, which is from 8:30 till 10. Students can go to what we call hybrid hub, which is think study hall. It's an area where students can be guaranteed to turn up and work very quietly or silently on their own. There's no group work projects going on. Occasionally, a teacher will meet with a small group of students to maybe have a quick workshop or something like that. But that's an unintended outcome. It's not the purpose. Students turn up knowing that they can do that. We started off with about 45% of students from years 9, 10 and 11 doing that. We only offer it for year 9 onwards. We're now down to about 35% of students who are tending to stay at home. Talking to a mentor group today who are in my office, we figure that might be to do with the cooler weather coming on. But there's either the hybrid hub where you come in and guaranteed the learning. We have 50% of our students who can walk 1.5 kilometres and get to school. We don't have great transport in Sydney's northwest as a growing region. The infrastructure cannot keep up. So some parents elect to drive their young people in at 10 o'clock, between 10 and 10:30, because they've already worked from home. Some of our young people are sleeping in. So if they're feeling tired, they're sleeping in and they do the work at another time. They're supposed to transfer the work. Some of them are honest to say that they're probably not transferring the full 1.5 hours 3 times a week. So that's just another thing that we're doing. Very, very well received by the students, who would say that it's been a key aspect of reducing their anxiety about keeping up with the work, as well as helping them with their sleep if necessary. Next slide, please, Darren. I'm just also conscious of time. This is another sort of opportunity here this is not St Luke's, this is Catholic Education Diocese of Parramatta. Their blended learning model, and in questioning everything, the system have come up with this blended learning model where the School of Now have these 4 elements to online learning delivery of stage 6 subjects. So it's not easy to find an experienced expert maths teacher for extension 2 or extension 1 subjects, your high level maths or sciences of chemistry and physics. That's been identified a few years ago. So our central system provides teachers to manage classes mainly remotely, occasionally on site, and working with groups of students from various schools so that they have the option of completing subjects. And I think they run about 11 or 12 subjects at the moment. We have students signed up to 7 of those lessons. And that for me is a really good reference point about what learning can look like, because if results are an indicator of success, and I'd say they're a lagging indicator of success, but if results are an indicator of success, some of these subjects that are led by these teachers are actually some of the highest achieving results across our whole diocese, and very, very, worth celebrating across the state. Thanks, Darren. So I'll lead in now to the what next, and this is where I especially appeal to our to the architects and the designers out there around what does this mean for the physical space that we've been used to designing and building for many years. There's lots of new designs coming up, but I think we need to be in front of the game of what the next design looks like. If it's going to be about next practices, which may not see as many students on site for as long as they are, especially in the older year groups, what does that mean for the physicality of a centralised school building? I also want to be on the record of saying I'm not advertising a full online learning model where students stay at home all day, every day. I'm not convinced. We all know that learning is highly relational. It's a human activity. It requires, if one thing we learned during COVID is we missed the human interaction. I do think there's a balance between 8:30 till 3, Monday to Friday, 6 50-minute or 5 60-minute periods, or 3 90-minute blocks of time. they're somewhere between School of Now, which is almost all virtual, and somewhere between the traditional construct of a school setting. So I think we need to take on some thinking from a person called Saul Kaplan, talks about best practices, next practices. Our best practices are necessary, but they're not sufficient for the next. They'll improve performance around current business models. So if we keep flogging HSC or VCE results or ATARs or NAPLAN assessment results as the be-all and enders, we'll keep improving in those spaces, but we won't be preparing our students for a life that no longer requires 3-hour examinations because they were set at a time where memorization counted. And we're going to build on those best practices for next practice. So to the leaders out there, we have to identify and experiment with next practices. Yes, we need to experiment or test and trial. If experiment's a dirty word in your language because parents or other proponents of your school want to challenge you about my child's on a guinea pig, drop the word experiment and use trial, use pilot, use test and pivot. They've become acceptable words over the last couple of years. We need to look outside our industry. You know, the old 80-20 Google time, whilst they might not do that anymore, that is something that we can pick up. We may need to look at how other industries are using virtual technologies in their space to induct staff before they even come on board. We'd need to develop a portfolio of those next practices, learning from other industries and by experimenting with our own or testing and trialing our own. If we just move on to the next slide, there might be a few suggestions about how we do that. We need to design a move away from face-to-face learning to blended learning. So that's not give up. As I said, I want to be on the record of saying I'm not suggesting that we drop face-to-face learning. But our students, especially our older students, do appreciate increased time where they're not locked into a space doing learning, some of whom will say they're not being extended and enriched. We need to allow for co-working spaces for senior secondary. Why can't we have think modern day library where people come in and all gather in the one space, but be intentional about it, that we have people from different sectors, different industries, different businesses, where we offer them a tea and a coffee and maybe even morning tea to be sitting at a desk in a big open learning or inquiry hub where students know that they can connect with the architect, where they can connect with the visual artist, where they can connect with the sound engineer, where they can connect with the Bitcoin speculator. We need to have tinkering spaces for our middle years. We need to intentionally signal to them that curiosity is okay once you get beyond 10 years of age, because we start quashing it in at 5. But our primary teachers and our infants teachers in particular do a great job of keeping that curiosity alive with students. And we need to have play spaces for our primary. We've got to get out of this, every 5-year-old learning for 2 hours before they go play for half an hour to then go in for another hour and a half to then play for half an hour. Some of those boys have ants in their pants and need to be out after 10 minutes. So what could that look like? And most essentially, we need to look at time-anchored learning, you know, year by year, 40 weeks, 6 hours a day. Why? We learned during COVID that's not necessary anymore. And move to a concept that I've recently come across of time shift accreditation. And I think that leads on to the next slide. So this is the ultimate, you know, to design for a physical, online and virtual environment, which enables the development of an adaptive curriculum that's scaffolded and supported by immersive technologies such as machine learning, artificial intelligence, augmented and virtual reality, which acknowledges students not by age, by ability. There are examples around the world right now, and I'll just reference one. I'm not sure it's on the next slide. I can't even remember, Darren, what the next slide is. We might just sort of go back and forth maybe. Is there a next slide? There may not be.
No, that's it.
All right. Okay. So I'll just elaborate on this a little bit more. So a physical, online and virtual environment. The online environment is the learning management system. Now, virtual environment's not just that, it's what's sitting underneath that, which is the machine learning, the artificial intelligence, the augmented and virtual realities what I'm hearing is the metaverse. I don't understand that concept, but I am of the understanding that that concept is made up of some or most of those sorts of things. We need to prepare for a day that looks a little bit like a school in Canada, and not just the older schools, but whereby students can work their way through the compliance requirements of a curriculum quicker than what we allow them to do right now. We hold every student back who could achieve surface level satisfactory attainment of key learning area outcomes, because that's all that's required. You are compliant if you set your curriculum up to do that. They are indicative hours to timetable. They're not compulsory. I haven't heard of a principal getting in trouble with the law of New South Wales, not system authorities or not other people, but we've fallen into confuse indicative hours with mandatory hours. We set learning up for 6 hours a day where some students could get through that learning in 2 hours a day. For others, the students with additional needs, yeah, sure, they're going to take longer. But the adaptive curriculum will cater for students. One application I'm aware of, Maths Pathways, to an extent, allows students to attain achievement to a satisfactory level by working through modules. We saw students self-accelerate incredibly through that during last year's lockdown. Why are we now holding them back and being the gatekeeper of when they can be released for students to do the next modules? That's not setting students up to be autonomous learners. The immersive technologies, there's a great, there's two questions to ask there. Can technology take over teachers? The answer is, in a lot of aspects, yes, it might. Yes, it can. It has the ability to do that. Should technology take over teacher work? The answer is a quite clear no, because we need to be able to understand that maybe in 5 years' time, there could be bots in rooms because of all the technology around at the moment, around voice and repetition, and the rules of reading could combine into each student having their own reading bot to be able to assist them to read. But ultimately, the teacher would be able to verify the progress of a student's learning to read, as it does write. There's lots of rules around different ways of writing. There's rules around argumentative writing. There's rules around persuasive writing. Some of the best writing breaks those rules, but again, the machine learning can work with human beings, and it's getting more sophisticated year in, year out, where the machine for different types of things may just be able to do it better than the human teacher. What we need to build up the belief of the teacher is that their job moves from monitoring feedback to understanding what feedback the students are getting, and more crucially, placing them in their proximal zone of learning, so that students can, as I said, go through that adaptive curriculum, scaffolded and supported by immersive technologies and sophisticated technologies, which acknowledges student age, not by ability, and frees them up where students can buy back time to go on deeper learning escapades and adventures with teachers monitoring that learning, and students can bring back what they've learned to maybe move from a D to a C to a B to an A, if that's the pursuit. And I dislike using grades because we don't use them at St Luke's, but you understand that we use the surface deep and transfer learning. We would be setting something up, or schools could set that up, so students achieve surface level attainment of surface level learning and satisfactory attainment of key learning outcomes, with a view that they could then set their own agenda for deeper learning and learning that can be transferred to other contexts. And so my question, especially, and I'll go back to where I started, is, what are the new ways of learning, and what environments will best serve those new ways of learning, not just for teachers, not just for students, but for teachers and post-school learners that could be those co-working space people I referenced through the presentation. I think my time's up. I've probably got a little bit over time, Darren. I'll leave it with you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely fantastic. Thanks, Greg. You and I could do this all afternoon, right?
Yeah,
I love it when I
absolutely.
hear someone and you started talking on slides, and then the last one, and you didn't have a slide, all of a sudden the passion comes through about how it all goes. And there are so many questions and conversations
Okay.
to have in this space, and I love it. We have had one question from someone in our audience this afternoon. Wants to know, is there a flow-on effect into the other schools in the Catholic diocese? Yeah. Are other schools following similar? Is it just you on your own? What's happening as a result?
No. Well, I mentioned two other schools earlier, Santa Sophia and well, they've just had a name change, but St Mark's at Stanhope, Peter Webster's the principal there, and Mark DeVries at Santa Sophia. We talk regularly. We often bounce ideas off each other. So is exactly the same thing happening in all three schools? No, but there'd be a lot of exciting things. Like I've learned from Peter, especially around the early commencement of VET. So we commence VET early because why not? Kids get a certificate. It's real world learning. But it's well, again, you know, I referenced that conversation that was had during the holidays. I would say yes, but each school is at different stages, and you know, very few of our established schools have the advantage of having a greenfield site. Yeah, and you know, that is a decided advantage. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, great. Look, I'm just going to throw some questions at you because I agree so much with everything you've talked about this afternoon. Micro-credentials. I saw you've put in there about some credentialing. Is that a space that you're moving more into with your young people? Especially, I'm thinking in the secondary, the senior secondary, where you talked about the School of Entrepreneurs.
Yeah, most definitely. So we use Credly that's a worldwide credentialing system. We use that to acknowledge the attainment of learning, especially in life design, but also we break up some of the VET certification to badge that as well. So that's just also a motivator for students to represent their learning progress towards that end certification. But yeah, we do that. We also have a few students who are engaged in industry accredited courses because, especially in year 11, we've freed up time for them to engage in that. I would say we're far closer to the beginning of that than the end of that. But that's something that then needs to come on board with a learner profile and be combined with their online folio of evidence.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And look, I'll just go through them, right, rather than unpacking more and more because there's so many coming through here.
Yeah, you're right.
And this is actually a question that I was actually also going to wonder about. The question is, what strategies do you use to educate your parents and bring them along?
Great question. Look, I'll probably use that late start as an example. We treat our parents as having the intelligence to engage in the conversation. We respect that many of them are working in workplaces experiencing the complete and utter disruption of the last couple of years. And while, you know, we share in research, we share in context, we make proposals, we consult, we honour their feedback along with student feedback to reiterate and design what we come up with. So we never started with 3 late starts on a Monday to Friday. That came after 3 months of consultation, 3 times with parents, 3 times with students, and 3 times with staff. We actually started off with the idea of late start, late finish, but because of feedback we got from families, they were dead set against the late finish. So we had to keep working our way towards how do we not so much compromise, but maintain the integrity. So a lot of consultation. Our parents have a lot to give. You'll always hear from the naysayers. You'll never please everyone all the time. Sometimes you just got to make a decision and remind all our community, we are the experts in the education space. You know, we are the experts, and we sometimes don't back ourselves enough to say, no, this is the right way forward based on all the consultation.
That's good. Like, honestly, another conversation we should have at one stage is actually around your leadership. We've got a number of educational conversations, but to take a growing community, one, leading a growing community, but secondly, actually implementing significant change in the midst of growth is an incredible study in leadership that we could talk about that as a whole separate study. A couple of other questions coming through. Sure. One from an architect about the types of, can you expand on the types of learning spaces that have been good enablers of learning?
Ones that are flexible and agile. That's probably the flexibility and agility. They have enabled students, providing students with choice, the flexibility to set up and sit down spaces quickly, because there are big. Look, our spaces 2 to 60 allows us to build larger spaces, and as a part of that, we allow for students don't sit at the same desk all day every day. They will sit at different places at the direction of their teachers. So I've just come back to flexibility and agility, and I know we're short on time, but I would reference for anyone who's looking to learn more about that, Paul Meldrum, who's in our system, has a wealth of knowledge there, and he's very, very giving of his time. I don't want to create more work for him because he's got plenty of work, but Paul would be also happy to have a conversation, because a lot of the way St Luke's was built and Santa Sophia was built on research that keeps evolving. And but flexibility and agility would be the two keys, and a choice of furniture for students.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I loved what you said about the furniture, like especially for 90 minutes. Like as a principal, when I used to go and do a student for a day, once a term, and I'd pick a different grade, and I'd go, and I'll tell you what, I had ADD when I was a kid. Now as an adult, it was even worse. I'm sitting going, really, we're doing this to kids every day? Anyway, as I say, we could do this forever. Here we go. Here's some education questions. It's around the system. Does the system not require grades for reporting? And about using what have you replaced the 5-point scale with? And how do you get around the A to E grade descriptors and things like that?
We don't. We comply because we're obligated to report twice a year. And we do fall in the line in relation to reporting at the end of a semester, but it just says twice yearly. It doesn't say at the end of the semester, but we do that. So, but we still allocate a 5-point scale. So we don't use the terminology A to E. I think it's emerging, satisfactory, competent, mastery, accelerant. I honestly have forgotten the language.
Yeah.
But essentially, teachers, we just enter that. It's reflected, because reports don't have to have a comment. Reports don't have to have learning habits. They don't have to have explainers for every key learning area. We've created this ourselves. What we do is that we actually free up time for K to 6 anyway, where each parent gets an explicit piece of feedback on a weekly basis. So by the end of a semester, a parent's got equivalent of about 16 explicit pieces of feedback around their child's learning. They don't get that on a report.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So there's a number of things. To sum up, we comply, we produce a report. We're moving towards a dashboard that has a lot more information than a report, and especially around the capabilities, learning progressions we're trying to build into it as well, those sorts of things.
Yeah. Fantastic. And honestly, at schools, I think sometimes we've created a bit of a rod for our own back on the way that we do some of those things. The other area that I'd love us to see us all band together is actually about banding against the ranking and the league table things that come in at HSC, because we all know it's poor. It's all about memorization, but then we buy into it when our school gets a number that we like. Oh, now we'll use that as marketing, but we know as educators we hate it. Oh, now it's a good marketing tool. Now I'm going to promote it and say how wonderful. Honestly, it's a game that we all need to.
Just on that, a quick shout out to Emmaus Catholic College at Kemps Creek. They produced at the beginning of this year the best Year 12 summary that had HSC sort of down here in this bottom left-hand corner, and then it had all these other accomplishments of the year group. It was great. To Rob Nastasi and his team there, it was brilliant. Great. It was excellent.
That's good shout out, because we just all keep buying into this nonsense. Hey, I'm interested in strengths-based education. You listed your strengths before. I know mine, and I've done work with that in schools before. Can you tell me what happens with the students in there? Like, at what age do you introduce that? How do they know? How does that play out in a classroom environment, knowing that, we've all got different strengths in that space?
Sure. So we use the Clifton Strengths Finder backed on 45, 50 years of knowledge. Our life coaches are experienced in that in the adult world, have worked with us for 6 years now to adapt that. So there's the Junior Clifton Strengths Finder, which is not narrowed, but they get 3 strengths out of 10 categories, I think is the term.
Yes.
They spend a couple of years unpacking that. Prior to them sitting that and getting that feedback, our staff work with those life coaches to unpack that. And they do spend a fair bit of time of learning a little bit more about that. And then they're challenged to see how those strengths can be applied or used fruitfully to help others less fortunate themselves. What we're also about to embark on is representing that graphically across all key learning areas, as well as the other areas. I won't get into that at the moment because that's next stuff. And then we use the VIA, which is more around motivation than talents, and that's unpacked with the students so that they have, and then go back into the full adult Clifton Strengths Finder at the age of 14, 15 at the beginning of year 9, because that research says it doesn't change much after that at all. It changes very limited. And that work, along with some other work that's done, every child knows their SIM, their strengths, their interests, their motivation. When it's combined with an area of passion, they find purpose.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's so good because we try to fit everyone into a box.
Yep.
Let's make them all wear the same uniform, put them all in the run room at the one time, and then actually we're all wired differently, and yet we should be able to celebrate that. We want to say our students are unique, but actually I want them all to be this really quiet, compliant, silent person who just sits there and writes down it kills me. We don't draw the best out of who they are and allow them to express that. So thank you for sharing. Look, to the members of the audience, are there any final questions that you want to know hear from Greg? It's your last chance before he's going to wind up pearls of wisdom at the end here. No, Greg, as I say, I've still got a page of things that I'd happily chat to you about, but we do try to keep it to just under an hour. I really want to thank everyone for logging in this afternoon. It has been great to have such a large audience hearing from Greg, who is just, as I say, one of Australia's best educators, thinks about it, inspires a new way of what learning can look like. And so, Greg, on behalf of LEA, I just really want to thank you for your time this afternoon. End of a busy day. It's been a hectic time for principals, and to have you prepare and then share with us, really, really appreciate it, mate. So thank you.
No worries, Darren. And just one last thing, I wanted to thank everyone for persevering and listening for the last hour. So thank you very much. But the offer's there to either join us on a professional learning tool where we can share a lot more of this information, a lot more depth, and probably by people who, what is the definition of leadership? Surround yourself with people smarter than yourself. So I've got plenty of those. Maybe that's not hard, but I've got plenty of those around me. And we advertise those as well, and happy to share anything and everything, or to have other offline conversations when it's mutually suitable. So again, thanks very much for the invitation. I really appreciated your chairing, after the presentation. To all the LAA team that's helped out this afternoon, I really, really appreciate it. And to those in the audience, I hope it's been helpful.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Greg. And for all the members of the audience, the recording will be on the LEA website, and the presentation will be shared there as well. So make sure you actually get some of your team members to listen to some of the work that Greg and the school are doing out there at St. Luke's, because it really is an inspirational way of looking at teaching and learning and creating a school. Join us again for some of the other LEA events that we've got coming up. Joe mentioned them at the start. It's a great group to be a part of. And we do look at what schools can look like here and now and into the future. And with that, I'll hand over to Joe, our awesome chair.
Oh, thanks, Darren. You've pretty much covered everything. Greg, thanks so much. So inspiring, so thought-provoking. I think everyone's, synapses are just going off, and there's so many more questions that people have. Love your enthusiasm, and Darren, yours as well. You've done a great job facilitating this afternoon, so thanks so much. So everyone look out for future events. Our next one, as we said, is down at Oak Flats. Love to see you there. It's a face-to-face agile learning space. You'll actually be experiencing the space rather than just looking at it. And we've got some other webinars coming up, so keep an eye on that. And thanks everyone so much. And thanks again, Greg and Darren.
Thanks very much.
Okay, bye everyone.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye.